Hello, good evening. Happy New Year. I'm Roger Johnson. Welcome to the first full Northwest Tonight of 2025 and thank you for your company. Our top story. Nearly 1,000 people evacuated in Greater Manchester alone as New Year rain hammers the region.
We'd never seen it like that. It happened so quickly and within 40 minutes we were submerged.
In Cheshire, farmland is inundated as the banks of the Bridgewater Canal collapse near Dunham Massey. Communities in Lancashire and parts of Merseyside were also affected, and we will take a look at the clear-up. Also tonight, the health benefits of music, why a hospital therapy group wants more volunteers to help the healing. The rocket boat taking shape in a Lancashire garage, aiming to break the water speed record for the first time in 40 years.
And after a very wet start to the new year, a different feel to the weather with a frost and clear blue skies. But that cold theme is going to continue into this weekend. Do join me at the end of the programme. We've got a lot of weather details for you.
Dry January has become a bit of a thing over the years, hasn't it? The start of 2025 was anything but. 3 weeks' worth of rain fell while many people were still wishing each other Happy New Year. Hundreds of people were evacuated from flats in Stockport. Cars were stranded in Wigan, homes flooded in Ormskirk, and people taken from a hotel in Didsbury. The streets were awash in St Helens, and in Ribchester, for some, a rib might have been more use than a car. In Greater Manchester alone, almost 1,000 people had to be evacuated, almost half of them in boats. We have 3 reports for you tonight, beginning with Phil McCann.
A rude awakening on New Year's Day. Neighbourhoods across the northwest found themselves underwater. Fields, roads, railway lines were submerged. And 1,000 people were evacuated from their homes.
We'd never seen it like that. It happened so quickly in the morning. The floodwaters started coming and within 40 minutes we were submerged.
We're sort of just helpless really, because you can't really do anything at the end of the day when all that's happening. Nobody can do anything.
A hotel in Didsbury housing asylum seekers was one of the places evacuated. Around 450 people, including children, were taken out on rafts. They were brought here to Didsbury Mosque, where 13 people, including a newborn baby, stayed the night. Apartments next door were evacuated too. Douglas lives in one of them and slept at the mosque.
Families from the hotel were here. There was lots of kids, there was lots of chaos, but they managed to move them on really quite quickly.
Food, clothes and bedding were donated by local people and businesses.
At one point we had 300 people who needed blankets and pillows. I'm still overwhelmed and humbled by the response that we had from the community, from all backgrounds.
Over in Stockport, people were trapped in their flats in this converted mill before being rescued. Today, some of them went back to try and salvage what they could from the car park.
OK, won't even come undone. It's just one of them things that you can't stress about it. It's just like, what else are you supposed to do?
We're just up there and looked out about 4 in the morning, and yeah, it saw the car floating.
And in the basement, Steve's brand new gym business, which he spent £100,000 on. It was due to open this month.
Just broken-hearted, just distraught. It's been a dream to open this gym for me for, I don't know, a good couple of years, and then the opportunity came about in August, and yeah, just to see it like this and all the work that's gone into it and how far it's going to push us back, I don't know.
This was Glossop yesterday, just one of dozens of places also hit, along with other parts of Derbyshire, Cheshire and Lancashire. This was the main route into Preston.
Our control room, Northwest Fire Control, had over 400 calls to incidents across Greater Manchester, and many of those were small incidents and dealt with swiftly.
If it wasn't for this place, the flooding elsewhere in South Manchester yesterday could have been much worse. This is Fletcher Moss, a designated flood basin, so water from the River Mersey was diverted into here yesterday. There's a flood barrier just down the road there, but the water was too much even for that. It overtopped the barrier and left this car stranded, and water went in to those houses just next to us.
We keep giving the reassurances that this sort of weather event would never happen. This time round, it has happened, and I think there are now a lot of questions that need to be asked.
But for now, the focus is on the clean-up before what everyone hopes will be a drier January. Phil McCann, BBC North West Tonight.
For those of us lucky enough not to have been flooded, your heart goes out to people who were, doesn't it? That was the situation in Greater Manchester, as I mentioned. There was flooding right across the region. This was Halsall Lane in Ormskirk in Lancashire. That was last night, where firefighters had to rescue people from their homes. Today, they went back to assess the damage, and Lindsay Prosser went with some of the residents.
This is Megan and Andrew's first home. They were planning their wedding. Now they're trying to salvage what's left of their belongings.
I think it's just one day at a time. Today we're just taking pictures of everything for the insurance, and then for the rest of the week it'll be the clean-up, really.
I just don't know how long it's going to take. I've never done this before, obviously. Just no idea what to do next, really.
Like their neighbours, the couple were rescued from their home by firefighters. Now Andrew's mum and grandma have come to the rescue.
Once we've had the loss assessor here to have a look and see, then yes, we'll be clearing it up. So it's down to us, isn't it, really? There's nobody else going to do it.
A few doors down, landlord Mark Jones is pumping water out of his basement. He believes a nearby culvert is part of the problem.
So I went over with a rake, started raking out on my own. I didn't feel quite safe because I know the culvert's about 8 foot deep. So my wife came over, got some local residents, anyone with a rake, basically, to rake out. We spent a couple of hours raking out the culvert, and the water level on the culvert dropped about 6 or 8 feet.
Some of the residents have said that it's a culvert in a nearby park that's the issue. What would you say to that?
Well, I can't comment on that because there could be multiple reasons why this has happened, and our Borough Council will be looking into those different reasons that could have attributed to this.
Engineers have turned off the electricity supply to the flooded homes. Each home will have to be assessed before the supply can be switched back on.
I'm fortunate because one of my nephews is an electrician and he's on his way now. But I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people that will struggle to do that. It's not going to be cheap for people to be getting electricians out at this time of year and getting it checked. I would have thought that would have been, you know, if not their responsibility, at least something they could assist with. But we haven't seen anyone help at all.
Today, West Lancashire Council met to assess the support this community needs in the days and weeks ahead. Lindsay Prosser, BBC North West Tonight, Ormskirk.
Well, it wasn't just homes which were affected, of course. Boat owners on the historic Bridgewater Canal in Cheshire fear that it could take years for that to be repaired after floodwater breached its banks. A large section of the canal, which was opened in 1761, collapsed early yesterday morning, flooding nearby fields and as sewage works. Andy Gills spent the day there as engineers began to assess the damage.
From the air, the scale of the canal collapse becomes starkly apparent. The canal usually runs on an embankment above the nearby fields, but the left-hand bank here has gone, flooding a wide area. On the ground, you can see and hear the torrent of water gushing into the chasm caused by the collapse. It's rendered this part of the canal unnavigable and left the towpath dangerously unstable.
I think it's just a staggering impression of the power of nature. But what you can tell is that the original build of the embankment was only sand, not very strong.
I've seen pictures on the internet, but once you hear it looks much more significant and serious. Yeah, it's quite dramatic.
This part of the canal collapsed back in 1971. Then it took 2 years for it to be repaired.
This is the bit that they rebuilt. You can see it's quite different. And that over there is just a big embankment of soil, so they're going to have to do a lot of work before they replace that. So this is it for years.
Along the canal, boats have been left high and dry by the receding water. Josh and Diane Taylor were aboard their boat when it began to list.
It was just a big panic because we didn't know what was actually happening. We didn't know how far the breach was. We didn't even know if it was a breach. We thought someone may have left the sluices open somewhere and all the water was racing out.
The Taylors spend all year cruising the UK. Now they don't know when they'll be able to move from here.
Stranded, I suppose the word's for it, isn't it, really? Because we can't go anywhere.
You know, and then it's frustrating because we usually cruise really every 3 or 4 days.
The flooding has also affected the nearby sewage works. United Utilities say they're managing a recovery position here at the Dunham Massey sewage works, but they say access to the site is being hampered because of health and safety concerns. They say they're working round the clock with other agencies. Tonight, Peel Holdings, which owns the canal, said it's too early to say why the collapse happened. It said emergency action by its workers prevented a 3-kilometre section of the canal from emptying completely. Andy Gill, BBC North West Tonight, Dunham Massey.
Well, certainly spectacular pictures, aren't they? The floodwaters are subsiding now, but questions are being asked about how prepared the authorities were for what happened, and are regular floods something that we're just going to have to get used to? Our environment correspondent Judy Hobson's here in the studio. Happy New Year from me to you, but not for many people, Judy.
No, absolutely not. Well, more than 88 millimetres of rain fell in 24 hours in some parts of the region. That's around 3 weeks' worth of rain, and most of it fell between 6 p.m. and 7 a.m. on New Year's Day. Now, the Environment Agency says there were yellow weather warnings in place and one amber. But 500 people still had to be rescued by boat in South Manchester. Mayor Andy Burnham says there must be a thorough investigation into how events unfolded.
We will need to look back at this and just ask whether the right warnings were given. Obviously, it seems to have been a highly localised weather event where torrential rain was experienced in certain locations in Greater Manchester. But nevertheless, you know, we will always ask those questions, as well as considering whether the flood defences are adequate, particularly in locations like Didsbury.
Well, here are some stats for you. The Environment Agency says 10,000 properties were warned that flooding could occur, and it issued 70 flood warnings. And at least 21,000 homes were prevented from flooding thanks to flood defences.
We can never entirely eliminate the risk of flooding, and so we and other organisations will continue to do all we can to build more and better defences to help people. And increasingly, that's involving the use of nature as well as hard concrete defences, etc. And to try to build in flood resilience to how we deal with the risk of flooding if it does occur.
So, is this a result of climate change? Well, the Tyndall Centre in Manchester is one of the country's leading climate change research centres.
This event is consistent with what we'd expect from climate change. The intensification of rainfall events we've seen across Europe and over the last decades has been attributed and shown that humans are having an influence on that intensification of rainfall, so more frequent, intense, heavy rainfall.
Well, the Tyndall Centre says we really need to be prepared and have better surface drainage as well as flood defences. But there could be up to a foot of snow on high ground at the weekend, and when that melts, I'm afraid there could be more flooding.
Yeah, indeed, Judy, and Kay will have more on that shortly. Thank you very much, Judy Hobson there. You can keep up to date, just to tell you, with the impact of the floods on the BBC News website and app. It's being updated with the latest news in real time from across the northwest. One of the many stories you can read describes how Daniel Pownall and his family were woken by the screams of neighbours as houses in Haydock were suddenly flooded. Daniel's son says he thought he was going to drown as the water poured in at 3 o'clock in the morning on New Year's Day. And as I mentioned, Kay will have a full forecast for us in a few minutes' time. Now, elsewhere tonight, Avanti West Coast train services were disrupted today as guards staged their second strike in 3 days. There were no Avanti trains to Blackpool and only 1 an hour between London, Crewe and Manchester. Union members who want more money to work on their rest days plan to strike every Sunday between mid-January and the end of May.
What Avanti has suffered from is inadequate staffing levels, which means they have to rely on staff working their days off. And they haven't made a satisfactory offer to our members to provide additional pay for working their days off.
The Lake District's mountain rescue teams had one of their busiest years in 2023, responding to 15% more emergencies. They were called out more than 800 times. It says 2023 there, it surely means 2024. 800 times last year. Many of the walkers and climbers they rescued had minor injuries. Last month alone, there were 4 deaths. On Monday, a man in his 40s died after falling nearly 600 feet from Helvellyn. Wonderful work, as always, done by our mountain rescue teams who had a busy year last year. Now, heritage campaigners are hoping to protect Preston's historic buildings. They're determined to save important sites from risk of vandalism and fire. The former home of suffragette Edith Rigby is among those which could be at risk. The council is warning that it will take enforcement action if private owners neglect historic properties. Now, political row has broken out after the government said that it wouldn't hold a public inquiry into the Oldham grooming scandal. Last year, an independent review, which was commissioned by the Mayor of Greater Manchester, concluded that grooming victims there had been failed by the police and social services. Oldham Council demanded a full public inquiry. But that has now been rejected by the Safeguarding Minister, Jess Phillips. Katie Barnfield has been following the story and is in the newsroom for us this evening. So, Katie, just tell us exactly what happened.
Roger, this all centres around a letter written by Jess Phillips to Oldham Council refusing their request for the government to independently review the handling of abuse cases in the town, stretching back over a decade. Now, in the letter, which has been seen by the BBC, she says, "I believe it is for Oldham Council alone to decide to commission an inquiry into child exploitation locally, rather than for the government to intervene." And she says, should the council choose to proceed on its own, she would welcome their findings. Now, this has caused some uproar in the Conservatives, particularly from their leader, Kemi Badenoch, who took to X earlier to call for a full national inquiry into what she called the rape gang scandal, saying this was long overdue. Now, her response actually follows a series of messages on X by the platform's owner, the US billionaire Elon Musk, who said things like Jess Phillips deserves to be in prison for refusing Oldham Council's request. It is worth saying that his criticism of the current Labour government is nothing new, and that he has, of course, supported far-right figures like the English Defence League founder Tommy Robinson.
There has already been some national inquiry into this, though, hasn't there, Katie?
There has, Roger. Well, as well as that review commissioned by the Mayor, Andy Burnham, that you mentioned, that was specific to Oldham, there was also a wide-ranging 7-year inquiry into child sexual exploitation across the UK. That published its findings in 2022 under the previous Conservative government. Its author has expressed her frustration that none of the recommendations in that inquiry have been implemented yet. Now, we've heard from the Labour Party earlier, who told us the government is working at pace now to change this. They say they supported the review into Oldham commissioned by the Mayor, Andy Burnham, and that they would support a new independent investigation if it's council-led.
Katie, thank you very much. Katie Barnfield there reporting for us. Now, a young musician who was treated at the Royal Manchester Children's Hospital for chronic fatigue is now back on the wards, but in a very different capacity. She's entertaining children in therapeutic sessions. Hepzibah Isherwood, who had to pause her music studies as a teenager, is now using her music to help others, as Phil Chapman reports.
They say laughter can be the best medicine, and a good dose of music also plays a huge part in the therapy and recovery of patients here at the Royal Manchester Children's Hospital. And for Hepzibah, who spent years tackling severe ME here at the hospital, being part of the Manchester-based Songbirds music team is life coming full circle.
So I had chronic fatigue, ME, quite bad. I was housebound and in a wheelchair for several years. And so just had to relearn all of those things: walking, talking, memory, communication, functioning again in life. Yeah, and so I was an outpatient at this hospital, but then used music a lot in my own rehab to access all of those things and kind of design my own programme of recovery.
And the Songbirds team says music can have a tangible impact when it comes to recovery.
I think what people don't realise as well is how much music impacts at a physical and biological level. Like, most of us will acknowledge, oh yeah, it makes us feel better or something. But particularly when we're working on the ICU, we see oxygen stats respond, we see heart rate respond, sometimes they're able to reduce sedation. Like, it has a physical and biological effect, as well as just being a nice thing and a soothing thing.
The patient experience that they provide for our families, for our patients and for staff is just amazing. The feedback that we do receive back is just beneficial. For us, it's not just the icing on the cake. They are ingredients within the NHS.
The layout of the ward is that some children are in their own cubicles with a bed, so those environments are really nice to make music in, because once you're welcomed in, you can kind of make lots of noise within the space.
And more people like Hepzibah are being sought to help make music on the wards.
Isabel's journey is very special. That she was a patient here. She loved music but was unable to carry on with her music studies. So through Songbirds we've been able to support her to train and now work as a musician, now working with other patients. And it's something that we're very, very keen to develop in the future and find more young patients who might want to be part of our programme so they can come in and do music as well.
It just feels like such a privilege to be back here and yeah, able to be a part of that in other people's journey.
Phil Chapman, BBC North West Tonight, Manchester.
Now, over the past few years, if you're a regular viewer, you'll know we've followed the story of Donald Campbell's Bluebird K7 and her return to Coniston. It's the 58th anniversary, in fact, of Campbell's ill-fated world water speed record attempt this weekend. But now, that's not Bluebird. This is a new challenge for the record, which is underway. And as Phil Cunliffe has been finding out, it's taking shape in a workshop near Blackpool.
Dave Aldred's passion is jet-powered boats, like the one taking shape in his Fylde Coast garage. Resting on a trailer, right now it's hard to picture this hydroplane conquering the world, but that's certainly the plan.
The record is 317, 370 mile an hour, so that's what we're focusing on at the moment. Unlike a land speed record where it's done in the desert and it's just a YouTube video, this will be done in the Lake District, where you can come and see it, skimming across the water with a guy putting his life on the line to get the record for Britain.
Which is what Donald Campbell did.
Donald Campbell prepared for another shot at the world water speed record.
The Speed King is Dave's inspiration. In fact, Dave worked on the restoration of Campbell's Bluebird K7 and has recently sourced 2 new engines for its planned return to Coniston next year.
Well, there are some obvious differences to Bluebird K7. This vessel is going to be much longer. The frame is made of wood, not metal, and at the back of the boat, Bluebird had 1 engine. This has 2.
That's twice the thrust of Ken Warby's boat when the Aussie set the current world water speed record in 1978.
If you put this boat on its backside, it will go straight up and carry on going.
Like a rocket to Mars?
Well, preferably, we'd like to keep it on the water. We don't want DJ sat in there going, I can see the pub from here.
DJ is Flight Lieutenant David John Gibbs, an RAF pilot, seen here posing in Bluebird. When he drives Longbow, he'll be sat inside this, a cockpit designed to break free in the event of a crash. Safety is paramount, and Dave says he'll resist calls to push on with record attempts if there's any hint of danger.
You get into a situation which I would call press-on-itis, where you're under pressure from sponsors and the public and everybody else to just get on with it. Campbell killed himself, and the last 2 attempts since Ken Warby got the record have both been fatal. You find a problem, go away and sort it out. There's always another day.
Australia also want to set a new speed record, and they have a boat ready to go and a capable pilot in Dave Warby, who is Ken Warby's son.
Dave said to me, well, if I break my dad's record by a little bit, how about you bump it up a little bit at your end? And we'll do this between Australia and the UK.
Dave and his team of engineers are happy to embrace competition, but there's a lot of work ahead before Longbow swings into action. Phil Cunliffe, BBC North West Tonight, Lancashire.
Yeah, it looks like a fair bit of work to be done as well, but we'll continue to follow it. Right, on to the weather. Just to be clear, Happy New Year. Kay has not had a very heavy Christmas. You have got a sore throat.
It's been a busy Christmas, Roger. Well, yes, no, I'll start the new year off with a little illness, but I knew how important it was to be here today for the weather because there's a whole host of weather going on, isn't there? Not least the flooding we've had and a change to come more in a minute. I wanted to start off with this fabulous photograph. Johnny, as always, an incredible picture of last night's Northern Lights that some were lucky enough to see. Small chance this weekend, we're going to need clear skies, and I'm not so sure we're going to get that. And over in Crosby today, blue skies. It's been a chilly old day, hasn't it? But plenty of sunshine. Thank you so much for sending those photographs in. If you would like to try and get yours on the telly, then join me on socials or become a BBC weather watcher and let me know what it's like in your part of the world, which for this weekend, which is where I'll start, expect it to be of some snowy scenes. We've got snow and ice warnings in force right throughout the weekend. It'll be a cold and a frosty day on Saturday with disruptive snow heading our way through Saturday night. Do keep an eye on the BBC weather website to keep right up to date. So what is going on? What's the bigger picture? Well, You can see this front's going to introduce some showers through tomorrow. Not everyone will see them. A brief respite, but then this area of low pressure is going to come up. A milder direction bumps into that cold air. That is when we're going to see the snow, but not tonight. Tonight we've just got an ice warning in force for some parts of the northwest. We've had all that rain around and we're looking at a widespread hard frost tonight. So bear in mind the risk of ice first thing tomorrow. 2 degrees on the Isle of Man, down to -3 and -4 in other parts. It will get colder than that in more rural spots, so a cold and a frosty start to your day tomorrow morning, with that ice risk valid until 10 o'clock. Expect to see some showers feeding in on a northwesterly flow. Now, for most parts, particularly for the coast, it'll be rain and sleet. Over any elevation, you are looking at a wintry mix of sleet and snow, with temperatures tomorrow 4 degrees up to 7 degrees on the Isle of Man. It's not going to really feel that warm. Into Saturday, here's this milder air coming up. It's going to bang into that cold Arctic air, and on the leading edge of it, that's where we're going to start to see the snow. And it looks at this stage anyway to be around about 9 o'clock Saturday night. We'll start to see some disruptive snow coming up, potential during Saturday night and into Sunday for 10 to 40 centimetres of snow falling, with the risk of ice as well and freezing rain as it clears through. It starts off fine on Saturday, but it will go downhill as we head through the evening. That's your forecast. That's your forecast.
Need some water. Sound like
so good to me.
Well done, well done. So, a little bit of laryngitis, sore throat.
Just one of the little kids, you know, breathing on me over Christmas and me cheering the new year.
Back at work. Here we go. Have a lovely evening. Lovely to have your company again. Take care.
Bye.